I am here at the Wentworth Villa for much the same reason that I'm here in Victoria rather than, you know, Vancouver, the city I originally thought I would move back to. I've spent most of my life living and working in Europe, the former center of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Vienna, Austria, and I came to North America thinking that I would just have to get used to not being impressed by architecture. When we got here, it felt like a European city on the other side of the planet. Here we are. There's these heritage buildings. It kind of looks a little bit like a cross between a Harry Potter movie or one of those 1980s horror films. You know what I mean? Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street. So just very, very charming architecture. Now I do tours about architecture, which I never thought I would do on a tricycle. So it's just like I also never would have imagined that I would do that. And I think I mostly say things which are true. I've learned some words, Italian at this, Edwardian that, Queen Anne revival this, you know, all of this stuff. But I felt also that there was a lot more to learn kind of about why we have a city like this with this kind of architecture and these kinds of influences, specifically here in the West Coast. So a couple months ago, I came here, met your colleague Ben, one of many, I hear, one of many Bens. In fact, you're in the minority. You're the only not Ben.
Yes, I am the first non-Ben.
First non-Ben.
Yes.
What motivates you? What excites you about architecture? Like, I know why I'm standing here. Why are you standing here?
Well, in some ways, the story is similar. I actually also lived in Vienna for a while, weirdly, and then in Prague. I'm a European historian originally by training. Most of my academic work was on the use of demons in medieval universities. Medieval universities themselves tend to be architecturally interesting buildings, and so I developed a kind of an appreciation for what architecture can tell us about people in the past. Right? We can look at medieval buildings to tell us about what medieval scholars were doing, and here in Victoria we can look at old buildings to tell us about what old Victorians were doing.
Right.
And so a lot of what I'm trying to do here at Wentworth Villa and in my scholarly work is to illuminate those sort of connections.
Right. Now, I've gone out and said, oh, well, this is like a European city on the other side of the world, but I think maybe you might have a slightly different take on that, just in the sense
in a sense, that's right, or at least that's something that a lot of people in Victoria were attempting to do. So when we look at architecture in Victoria, especially around 1870, 1880, this kind of Victorian period, a lot of them are deliberately taking inspiration from Europe, but kind of putting a North American twist on it, right? And so that's influenced by stuff like building materials. You're building in wood rather than stone.
And how long have you been at Wentworth Villa?
Not very long, just 5.5 months, something like that.
Okay, so by the time anybody sees this, just over a year.
Yeah, something like that.
Unless you get on the wrong side of the bends.
Could happen.
But hopefully that doesn't happen. And while we're here, we're not the only human beings in this building. I mean, of course, there's the camera crew, but also I've noticed that you're here, Teresa.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. It's wonderful to be here, and it's so good to meet you, Charles.
It's very good to have you as well.
Yes. I'm a volunteer at the Carr House, and my background comes from interior design. But I love it here. It's my first time here, so I look forward to exploring it more.
I do think it's really interesting that you have, like, you know, people who work very close to each other in the same sort of thing. It's a very small ecosystem, and yet, if I'm getting this right, you've never met.
No,
we haven't.
We've never met. I've just recently started volunteering at the Carr House. I'm actually now offering the architectural tours, sort of taking people through the architecture from the outside to the inside. But again, I have so many wonderful sites to visit and so much to explore.
We're in the Wentworth Villa. let's go for a little tour.
In many ways, the most natural place to start is here, actually, with this entrance hall. So I should say maybe just a couple brief words about the early history of the villa. So this was built in 1863, we believe, by the firm of Wright and Sanders, who were basically the only architects practicing in Victoria at the time. It was built for a Hudson's Bay Company captain named Henry Bailey Ella and his wife, and eventually their 7 children, and also the aunt. So there was a family of 10 living here, and it was not very well suited for them. The Ellas were pretty well off, and so they wanted their house to impress visitors. The front spaces are relatively lavish, they're relatively impressive, and it gets progressively less so as you go further back. One thing I always like to point out, though, is this entrance hall, right? So these appear to be marble niches. They're not. They're painted plaster.
Ah, okay.
Part of the reason is marble's expensive, but an even bigger part of the reason is a prestige consideration, which is in 1863 in Victoria, hiring a professional painter who could convincingly do fake marble was almost more impressive than having actual marble.
Oh, wow. So they were like, oh, we could have real marble, or we could have a painter do it fake, and that's actually more prestigious.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. There's no paint factory, so it was all mixed on site. Very heavily lead-based, but all using natural, like, local pigments because, yeah, no other option.
Hey, a little lead poisoning never hurt anyone.
So this is more about how these kinds of buildings have been treated over time. So when Wentworth Villa was built, it didn't really have foundations in the conventional sense. It was built on piles. Now, piles is an architectural term, but here I basically literally mean piles of rocks and wood. The result is that it's sunk. And so if you look at the floor down over there,
Oh, yeah?
you will see that it is very much sloping in every direction away from the chimney footings. So the only parts of the building that were securely sited were these chimney footings. And so the building basically sunk around them. When the museum moved in, we installed a foundation, but you couldn't fix the deformation of the building.
Part of the local charm.
You'll notice, right, as we're walking through, that there are models and display boards on the walls. That's because Wentworth Villa is really trying to do two things. We're trying to be both a historic home, presenting the house roughly as it was in about 1880, 1890, but we're also a museum of the architectural heritage of Victoria.
A lot of, heritage houses here, and this is by no means meant as an offense to any of the other ones, but like they're very much character-based, like, oh, this person lives here, and the approach here feels very much like, well, this is the entire like tapestry of architecture in the area at that time. It's a nice introduction as far as heritage houses go, because you get a broader overview, and then of course you go to other heritage houses and you get to know about the characters who lived there.
Victoria, although it's a historically interesting, architecturally interesting city, doesn't have a city museum because the Royal BC Museum, although it's very impressive and important, it has a much broader mandate. Yeah.
Right,
So we're trying to capture a little bit of that here.
Just one other thing. You said it gets much less lavish in the back. Could we just quickly see a very unlavish place?
Yes.
Let's see how unlavish it gets.
All right. Well, so this is the annex that was built in about 1880. It was built because the house wasn't large enough, and they wanted somewhere where basically they could have their servants. And it more or less started life as a lean-to. So they just built walls on 3 sides. And then stacked up above it. There was wallpaper decorating the house in front here. There's no wallpaper back here. There's just a thin layer of paint, or in some cases, just bare wood. So, actually, since you mentioned connections with Europe, before we go, maybe I should say something about the Carpenter Gothic style that this house is in.
Carpenter Gothic.
Yes.
Okay.
So, from Vienna, you're very familiar, I guess, with Gothic
Lots of
architecture,
Gothic,
right?
yes.
In the
Yeah,
medieval period, with these kind of soaring, usually very high arched windows and buttresses.
Sure.
Carpenter Gothic is a kind of attempt to recreate something like that style, but in North America.
Right.
So why Carpenter? Well, because in North America we've got a lot of wood and not a lot of stone. And so if you're trying to recreate the Gothic style, you can do so in wood. And so Carpenter Gothic is typified by first of all, this kind of Gothic proportion of verticality where we're sort of aiming upwards, drawing the attention upwards, but second, with intricate carved wooden details. And so Wentworth Villa is a kind of a perfect example of this. As we walk out onto the street, you'll be able to see, for example, that at the very top, under the barge boards, which themselves are carved in a sort of intricate Gothic way, there's what looks like a Gothic church window. It's got a sort of narrow pointed arch at the top, but it's all in wood.
And away we go.
So did you drive one of these in Vienna too?
No. No, I think the cobblestones would have thrown me off of that. Even though it wasn't...
Bouncing over the cobbles.
I know that there are a few pedicabs there, but not like storytelling tour guides. What were you doing in Vienna? You said you lived there for a while.
Yeah, I was there with my wife. She's a academic, a philosopher, so she had a research position there for a while. And then I worked as a tour guide in Prague as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. So a lot of kind of crossover between our two lives.
Yeah, weirdly, yeah.
Yeah. Teresa, you also said you spent some time in Europe, yeah?
Mostly Italy. I haven't lived there or studied there, but traveled.
Well, we've all seen enough of Europe that we know that there is that kind of inflection here that we've already been talking about a little bit. I had a friend from England come to visit, and he called it like Disneyland for British people.
Yeah, it's almost deliberately, that was like almost actually the goal. One of the oddities of Victoria, I mean, I guess it's not an oddity, but it's different from something like Vancouver, is that so much of our economic activity depends on tourism, which in turn depends on these historic buildings, right? And so you see, even as early as Francis Rattenbury, people recognizing that Victoria wasn't going to be able to compete as a commercial capital with Vancouver, and that they'd have to emphasize sort of a picturesque appearance so that it could continue to be the seat of government, to continue to be a tourist destination.
That's right. And just some context, Rattenbury designed our legislature, which Queen Victoria loved, and the Empress Hotel, some of our most iconic buildings.
And the steamship terminal building and the Crystal Garden, so that whole...
Exactly, that whole area, yeah.
There's an opera about him.
Is there really?
Yeah, about his final days.
Right, yeah, like murdered by his wife's adulterous lover, something like this?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, right.
Who was her driver, I hear.
But let's actually move back to the heritage societies and kind of like the huge efforts that they make to kind of preserve a lot of these buildings. Something that I've covered in a lot of Bon Victoriage episodes is that cultural venues are not always that secure. But like one does have the feeling that heritage buildings of a certain era are a little bit more protected.
In Victoria, a lot of the heritage preservation work has come out of societies that were created basically in the 60s and especially 70s in response to the demolition of a number of heritage homes.
It takes a while for to be recognized. They have heritage significance, so.
They're part of the character of the city, actually.
Exactly.
I think when you look at cities like Vancouver, you can really see the other direction things could have gone. Because I mean, I hardly recognize the city anymore. I'm really mean to Vancouver. It's the city I was born in. But...
Weirdly, I'm also was born in Vancouver.
Oh wow, Charles.
Vancouver in the West End, there's some good heritage preservation work, some very good work. But of course, you're right. Vancouver has.
And New West, the Royal City.
Yes,
we lived in New West, and they had a wonderful historic
That's right.
preservation. So and beautiful heritage homes there, much like this area. So
it's really striking how much anxiety about New Westminster drove a bunch of Victorian architecture as well. We talked about the legislature earlier. There was this big fear that the capital was going to move to New West.
Seriously?
So they had to build new legislature buildings.
Was that why?
A big part of the reason. I mean, the old buildings, the bird cages, were notoriously like drafty and cold and small. So there were good practical reasons too.
But yeah, I mean, there's like really strong heritage societies, which are why we've succeeded at protecting this in Victoria. And those are generally like private residence sort of things, like, right? Like private people were like, hey, I want to preserve this.
Preserve, yeah.
And a lot of the actual restoration work has been carried out by private citizens on their sort of own initiative as well,
Yeah.
right?
All these buildings that have the heritage plaque on them, and that's just like where people live. And I mean, we're passing them all the time. Like half the houses that we pass by, I feel like, are heritage houses in some of these neighborhoods. But then you have like the Wentworth Villas and the Carr Houses and stuff like that. Now I know for the Carr House, there's like a famous person who's associated with that. So it's kind of an obvious choice.
Yeah, but that took a long time to be recognized as well. You know, by the time, I mean, it was almost separate, well, it was set for demolition before it was purchased by a local MP. who basically saved it.
Which is a common story. I mean, also Craigdarroch Castle was not always a museum, and in fact, people didn't always know what that was going to be. That was another place with famously a big personality associated with it.
Yeah.
The Dunsmuir family, and specifically Robert Dunsmuir. But with Wentworth Villa, I mean, would you say that there was a big enough personality associated with the house that they were like, well, so that's
certainly not.
Right, that's the impression I had. So it's like, that's kind of one of the things that I find is kind of nifty about that one, that it is one that could have just been another private residential home that you could never go in, but it's not.
Well, so it was an antique store for 70 years.
Right.
And when they moved out, it was bought by the current owners of the Wentworth Villa Museum.
Yeah.
And restored and converted to a museum, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and with the Carr House, Emily's, I mean, she wasn't recognized as a great artist in that time, or even a substantial artist of the time. And now it's a National Historic Site, which it should be.
I feel like there must have just been like also a very particular time period where people living here must have kind of collectively been coming to the same thought, like if we don't use it, we lose it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Chinatown almost could have gone that way, right?
Yeah.
I know Tam Kung Temple, it's like this national historic site, but it's also like got a lot of issues.
Yeah, they've recently secured a quantity of funding for some restoration work and for building like a visitor's
I was part of that
access and
actually,
stuff.
but even so, it's like not completely out of the woods yet.
No, of course.
I mean, because there are still like big issues.
Yeah, it's protected sort of in a legal sense from, demolition or anything, but that's a different matter from having sort of guaranteed access to the funding they need.
May I ask, do you live in an interesting like Victorian style house?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay. Oh no.
I live in a modern building in Chinatown.
Oh, okay.
I live in a modern building too.
Oh, okay. So we
Surrounded
appreciate
by heritage buildings.
Okay.
Yeah.
We appreciate them from afar. I guess they're usually pretty pricey. Here we are. We're at our next heritage building.
Wonderful.
The Ross Bay Villa. Let's go take a look. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
You're looking historic and architecture-y. I feel like you're the person we're here to meet.
Just going with the theme. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Kathryn.
This is the Ross Bay Villa.
Yes, historic house museum from 1865. It is one of the oldest houses in the city, but what you're seeing right now is very much not what the project started out as. Taking you back in time all the way to the 1990s.
The 1990s.
I know, we're getting vintage with it. But just imagine rusted cars, an old boat, decaying, sagging sofa. What we started out with as this project was very much not what we ended up with. It was kind of an eyesore. It just wasn't well kept, but the historical community started looking at the property and realizing that, wait a second, this is really, really old for Victoria. And there's details in the architecture itself that kind of gave it away. There's a split stack chimney. There's finials, those are those spiky bits, that's the technical term. There's a lot of little details that pointed to this being Gothic Revival architecture, which was the first style of architecture that actually came to the new city of Victoria. But this was one of the first buildings that was put up with a sense of architecture instead of just, oh my gosh, there's so many people showing up for the gold rush, we don't have enough buildings for them.
Right.
Because that was 1858 when gold was found up the Fraser River. And so suddenly you had thousands of people coming here to what had been previously a quiet fur trading fort. And suddenly people started to realize that the way to earn money was to actually sell things to the gold miners.
Yeah.
So our Mr. Roscoe, the first inhabitant, came out here from England, became a hardware merchant, did quite well, and then was able to go back to England, marry his wife, come back here, and they had this house built for themselves just as they were having their first child.
Okay, so you say Roscoe, so that means there is kind of one of these big personalities of Victoria
yes.
here. Let's go in so that we're away from all of these trucks that are going by. I don't know how much we're capturing the trucks, but let's not.
Fair enough.
Let's get into the period, and I don't mean the 1990s.
The apple trees were also a clue to the age of the site. They weren't all the way from the 1860s, but they were very old. This is a snow apple tree, and that's a Wellington. I actually got married under that tree in 2017.
Wow!
Yeah, so my connection to this site
History.
is a lot of different things.
Your
I
own
came onto this
heritage.
project in 2015. It's actually been going as a restoration project by volunteers since the year 2000. It's now run and owned by the Ross Bay Villa Society, of which I'm currently the president. So it was everything from carting away rubbish outside, doing an archaeological dig on the site, finding all sorts of different things in there, and then the same with the house as well. Nothing had really been taken away. Wallpapers just got layered on top of each other. So the more we started to excavate and pull away the layers of the past, the more we realized that there was a lot of physical clues that we could use to kind of do this historical detective work to determine what the original inhabitants would have had available and what their tastes were. And then that was used to basically bring the past back to life. Because we don't want to just assume things, we need to have documentation. We are historians.
Right.
So one photo was really useful for us. This is from 1889. So this wasn't the Roscoe family, but it was another family who lived there later, the Coombe family. So this was really helpful to us for a number of reasons. There was a circular flower bed, so we did put that back. But also from the archaeological dig, we found broken pieces of garden tile. We were able to determine that they're Royal Doulton Gothic garden edging. So we've recreated those and put them back where we know that there was a flower bed. We don't know exactly where they had the tiles originally, but we know they had them in the site. And then this is physical evidence of a flower bed. So it's the kind of details that we've used.
Would you say that this is a very typical example of a building that could become, you know, a sort of heritage museum?
Well, I mean, I don't think any building is really typical when it's 100 and something years old.
Right.
But the fact that everything was so original, not that much had been moved around. And then once we started to research, we realized that it belonged to the Roscoe family, and he became our member of parliament after Confederation in 1874. So there's a lot of relevance in terms of the social and political history to Victoria as well. The reference to Mr. Roscoe, one of them anyway, came from a letter from Sir James Douglas to his daughter Jane. Do you remember the day when we broke down the beaver dam and let out the water from the further part of Fairfield near Mrs. Ross's house? There was now a pretty cottage half buried in roses and honeysuckle almost on the spot, occupied by Roscoe.
And that's right here.
And that also gave us the clue for what the greenery going up the side of the building is in this picture. So we have put it back, the roses and the honeysuckle.
Oh, I love that.
So that's basically how we've used the clues on the site with archival information to be as accurate as humanly possible.
Nice. A lot of detective work, minus the, you know, the murders associated with detective work, hopefully.
Not that we know of.
Okay.
No, it was a family home for many, many generations of families before it kind of went downhill.
And, you know, a lot of houses in Victoria famously haunted. Is this one of them?
As far as I know, no. I kind of like to think that the ghost is the house. You're walking back in time to the Victorian era and everything is accurate as possible. I feel like that's the ghost. And of course, there are a lot of layers to the past of this site. We know from Lekwungen oral traditions that the beaver dam would have been part of the stream system going from Ross Bay all the way up to the inner harbor. And in bad weather, the Lekwungen peoples would use this as a canoe portage. Instead of having to go around into James Bay, they would go through the network of small streams. So it is, even just with things like this, there's historical evidence to show how much has changed, how much has stayed the same. This villa was built on the traditional territories in the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. And so I do think that it's important to kind of keep that in mind as well.
It's so important, yeah.
As it is a settler site, we are mindful that we want to present the past respectfully, and we want to find more ways to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that would be interesting for everybody involved with a heritage building to also know kind of what was over there. Charles, I think you were saying something that like Fort Street where...
Yeah, well, so there's a fair bit of research that's attempting to draw parallels between indigenous land use patterns and later settler land use. So there is some evidence to think that some of the major arteries of colonial Victoria, like Fort Street, were pre-existing indigenous trails or portage routes, as over here. But in many cases, the urban archaeology is just not completed yet, and so we're relying on a mixture of oral tradition and trying to piece that together with the often quite fragmentary early colonial records. So yeah, it can be a challenge for sure.
Yeah, and we do know that there was reef net fishing, there was camas harvesting. This area was quite marshy initially, so there was a lot of hunting and fishing and gathering. The whole area, any Garryoak ecosystem, was basically terraformed by humans over thousands of years to be able to harvest camas and other crops. The settlers who came here didn't have that sense of understanding. They looked at it and went, oh, this is beautiful untouched nature, because it would fit in so well to this bucolic understanding of the ideal of untouched nature. Whereas the indigenous people were going, that's my farm. Right. We've spent generations tending to this land, getting it exactly how we want, with controlled burns. A lot of camas digging was done with implements that also aerated the soil. So there was a lot happening here, and part of the problem is that the settlers didn't necessarily understand what they were seeing. So when we're talking about settlement and colonization, the Roscoe family came here because he was the younger son of a banker. He didn't have a fortune of his own. In order to get married, you couldn't really have the wife of the family be the one anyone with an income. It was up to the man. So he came all the way here because he saw an economic opportunity, brought his family to live here in the sense of this bucolic, untouched wilderness, and didn't really understand what was here before. We do know that during this time period, the Lekwungen community were a lot more involved in society than maybe they later were. They were harvesting Olympia oysters and various crops and things like that. They were growing potatoes to sell to people as well. So they were participating in the economy that was being created here. It wasn't a sense that they were shoved out all the way and outside, as I think it did become. Because keep in mind, this isn't even Confederation yet. When the Roscoes came here, this was still colonial. So when this actually was being created as the Ross Bay Villa and they were coming to live, we weren't even part of Canada yet. Canada wasn't invented yet.
Right, wow. And what year was that, sorry?
So 1865 is when the house was built. We didn't enter Confederation in British Columbia until 1871. And then suddenly, the railway that had been a promise wasn't going to happen. The government didn't really want to pay for it. So actually that's why Mr. Roscoe entered politics, is because as a merchant, he understood the movement of goods and people and went, if we're going to be a country, this is not going to work unless we have a railway. So his job was to go all the way to Ottawa to go, this was a really long trip, guys. We need a railway.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys would like to come inside.
I think we would, yes.
All right, follow me.
Let's do it. Wow, look at all these hats.
We got a few of them. This one was handmade by one of our volunteers. For our garden party every year, I do end up in a full 1860s outfit, and including that hat. It's always quite fun to do. This foyer is actually, it looks like wood. It is not wood. This is wallpaper. It's been actually reproduced based on what we know of the original wallpaper in the house to have this wainscoting effect. They didn't necessarily have access to oak, but they really wanted oak. So we have it.
This reminds me of the fake marble at Wentworth Villa.
Very similar, yeah. It's that same concept of presenting that feeling of, we have an English countryside estate, even though it's a little bit smaller. It's certainly not in the English countryside, but whatever you had access to, you wanted to show your best for the public part of the house. So this was made by our volunteers. Similarly, the floor. Do you know what this is? Have you seen one of these?
Well, I've probably seen it, but I know.
It looks like linoleum, which hadn't been invented yet. This is called an oilcloth, and it's a heavy canvas that's been layered with linseed oil about 1 million times, and then a silk screen pattern put on top, again, by hand, by our volunteers. Because you didn't want to have a carpeted entryway. That's insane. You don't really want to have bare floorboards either. So this is a waterproof surface that makes it really easy to clean, and it has that effect of a tiled entryway. We know from physical evidence that there was an oilcloth. We don't know specifically what pattern, but we picked one that's from the appropriate time period that matches the wallpaper that we do know that they had. Now, would you like to come into the drawing room with me?
I think I would.
So welcome to the drawing room. Not quite in tune. But that is the original type of piano that they had. And we know that because when Mr. Roscoe unfortunately died shortly before Christmas, 1878, she had 5 kids and no family living here. So she moved out in January. But when she was doing so, she had an auction. And we managed to find the auction list in the Daily Colonist Archives, the newspaper. And you have piano in rosewood by Broadwood. So we got one. This is basically our shopping list. It is a wood frame piano, so it doesn't hold its tune for very long. That was considered to actually be preferable than a metal frame piano in the time period. They felt the sound was better, but it did also mean that you had to have a piano tuner come in relatively often, which I'm afraid we don't do currently.
Of course.
But this was a real middle-class status symbol. If you could afford to not only have such an elegant piece of furniture, but also be able to pay for lessons and to have the leisure time to play it. It was one of those clues for us that the Roscoes were a pretty educated, middle-class family with a sense of taste and refinement. Similarly, we have Singer sewing machine. Again, another middle-class, if you could afford it, it really made such a difference to domestic labor. Instead of having to hand stitch everything, you could make yourself curtains, you could make clothing for your children. It made women's labor a lot easier. So it's another of those things that we were pleased to see on this list.
Those curtains would be great for a dress.
Well, I mean, some of the pattern textiles that we have, like the ones here on the sewing machine, those are reproduction cotton patterns from the 1860s that people use down in the States for things like Civil War reenactments. So I do like to show a before and after. I feel like that's the best way to see the amount of work that's gone into this project. What we started out with was this.
Wow, that's historic in a whole other way.
Yeah, it really is.
Wow.
I like the dark green sponge paint. Similarly, the original fireplace here, it's slate that, again, has been veined to look like marble. And I like the Rubik's Cube, the rotten sort of meat there.
Yeah.
So this is what we started out with. Basically, every layer of wallpaper was just slapped on top of each other. So we scalpeled off every layer, kept track of where the holes in the wallpaper were. So by the time we got down to the bottom layer, we knew where the original pictures would have been. So we have pictures hanging in the appropriate spots. Then we found the original layer of wallpaper. We're able to create a full pattern repeat, and we've reproduced it to be back on the walls.
Interesting.
And this is the 150 years of wallpaper. So I like green. I'm a redhead. I think I'm contractually obligated to like green, but this shade in this entire room, I don't love the effect that it would have given.
It isn't easy being green.
Exactly, there you go. So then you go back throughout the 20th century into the Edwardian period, 1880s, and then here's the original pattern.
Oh my God, that's so much work.
This gave us the color story for the entire room. So from there we could go, okay, hey, the Roscoes are actually pretty fashionable, because we know in the 1860s that the wallpaper styles, it was cool to have contrasting color schemes, whereas by the 1870s it had moved more into complementary shades of the same kind of color. We don't necessarily think of this as an obvious combination, but I do really like it. And we do know from various sources that Mr. Roscoe was described as exceedingly fond of literature and a man of refinement and culture. So we did want the furnishings in general to reflect the fact that he was a bit of a bookworm.
Right. Speaking of which, you told me something about a bookcase.
So these bookcases are not original, but they're actual reproductions of one in the other room. That is one of the only pieces of furniture that we have that we're pretty sure is original to the house. So we assume that he would not have only one bookcase, which I can certainly relate to. So we've done a couple more. The little curtains might look a little funny to the modern eye, but when you had lovely leather bindings, you didn't want them to fade with the sunlight. Right. So you'd have these little curtains so the books would be protected. This is a very fancy way of displaying photos, and this is actually a photo of two of the Roscoe daughters, Katie and Maisie. Okay. So we found the photo in the BC archives and then found a book like this from the appropriate time period, and so we've kind of put them together to show what they would have displayed. There's a note in Mrs. Roscoe's diary saying, "Today Katie and Maisie were photographed by Mrs. Maynard in their velveteen frocks," and then we were able to actually track down the photo of Katie and Maisie in the velveteen frocks. Also, Mrs. Maynard did run her own photography studio. And
one of the Ella's preferred photographers as well, actually, interestingly. There's a connection.
She did kind of photograph everyone. She also did a lot of trick photography. I think she'd be really into Instagram if she was around today.
And are there still some Roscoes hanging around in Victoria?
Not in Victoria, so that's the thing. Because Mr. Roscoe died, unfortunately, quite suddenly, she sold off what they had with the auction list, moved back to England, and they never came back here.
Oh.
It's a long way.
Not even to visit?
Well, I mean, when you're saying visit, that's a really long way to go and visit as a woman with 5 kids.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
It took a month to get home. Because the railway wasn't here yet, right? So you had to go all the way down by steamer to San Francisco and then a train across the States, get to New York, get a hotel, deal with all of your children in January, and then take a steamer across the Atlantic. The steamer lost its rudder in the middle of the night and they had to go back and try a separate time. So yeah, that process took a month.
I mean, I don't even do more than one connecting flight, so.
You said you were hungry. We made lunch.
Ooh.
Literally.
Don't tempt me. I will eat this probably, the styrofoam.
Yeah, our volunteers have been not satisfied with just restoring the house. We want to interpret what the people would have had potentially for dinner, because we know that they had a lot of dinner guests. So we're focusing on what would have been available in Victoria during the 1860s and 70s and would have been appropriate for their table. So yeah, you get to hear about things like varnishing the shrimp.
Right.
Which we did with nail polish, pink nail polish, to give it that kind of translucent effect.
Yeah. Now, would this have been like a Tuesday evening? They're just like, oh, let's have some oysters and shrimps and fish, or was this like a special occasion?
I mean, I think this would probably have been a dinner when they had guests over, which they did fairly often. Okay. Obviously, this is a different color story than the other room. It is, again, the original wallpaper pattern that's been reproduced. The top paper was, again, made in-house. The other one was done by a mill in England. And this room has a lot of details in it. For example, Mr. Roscoe's grandfather's here, William Roscoe. He was a very well-respected man. His Wikipedia page is fascinating. Among other things, he was an MP for Liverpool and actually cast one of the votes that helped abolish the slave trade in the British Empire.
Oh,
so we really like
man.
him.
Yeah.
Here is Mr. and Mrs. Roscoe right here. That's Frank Roscoe and Anna Letitia Le Breton Roscoe.
Quite the beard.
Yeah. They had a lot of good beards back then. I'm sure you can appreciate that.
Yes, I can.
The floor, I'm just going to draw your attention to the Brussels carpet. Now, this is one of those things that we know they had because of the auction list, and we actually did a lot of fundraising to get our own. This is actually done in sections. If you look, you can see it's in strips, which I think was really sensible. We had it delivered in a big roll, and then we cut it to fit the room, which I think when you're ordering something from the other side of the world, getting here and realizing that you measured wrong would be pretty bad. So instead you get the roll and then you do the measuring, which we did by hand. We took everything out, put down a moisture barrier, laid everything out to fit and to match up, and then we sewed it together by hand. There's actually a piece of it I can show you here. We had tables going along the length of this room, and then there were several of us just working to sew the whole thing together.
That's a tremendous amount
A
of work.
labor of love.
Yeah.
Indeed,
very
my
much so.
wrists will never be the same. Yeah. But we did this whole thing in about a month.
Okay.
And it was very, very effective. It changed kind of the whole character of the room.
Yeah. Now, are you like listening to this and like taking notes for how you're gonna?
I'm curious. You did obviously a lot of this work was done by hand. Is that because of a desire to use period techniques?
Oh, of
or
course.
Is it, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we don't want to cut corners. We want to do everything right. We are all volunteers, so we're not doing this for glory or to get paid. We're doing it because we are really interested in the past. And especially, I think, at the villa, it's what were the appropriate techniques? How was it done originally? If we don't know, we end up doing a lot of research. Even YouTube sometimes was really helpful for this specifically.
And if you're gonna cut corners, you're gonna hand cut them.
Yes, precisely. So this is the public part of the house. Unless you were very good friends with the Roscoes, I don't think you would have gone through to the next part. The division between public and private space is something that was very much ingrained in Victorian society, the different spheres, both for women and men. So even just in the architectural plans for this site, you can see how ideas and attitudes and morality was imported to Victoria as part of this process of settlement. It's a real contrast to Indigenous housing, because at the time they lived in big houses, you might know them more as long houses, around a communal fire pit. There wasn't that same division between public and private space. So I do like to comment on that because it really has implications for Indigenous housing later on. So with that said, unless you were good friends, you would not have made it past that door, but would you like to come past that door with me?
I think we kind of have to now.
Okay.
It's Chekhov's door.
Oh dear, are we gonna fit?
Oh, okay. Well, we won't be in here for too long.
So this is the children's bedroom. This wallpaper was actually made by our volunteers directly. It was silk screened by hand based on just one fragment of the original pattern. It wasn't a full pattern repeat. One of our volunteers, who is a genius, went up a ladder with a UV light and found the ghosts of the pattern that had been burned into the plaster, traced them all, and then through some form of witchcraft, she managed to put everything together, create a full pattern repeat, and then create a silk screen for that. So this was all silk screened by hand.
That's wild.
It is tricky though, because details of domestic life are not really something that people always think to write down. It's just my kid's bedroom. I'm not going to document that.
Sure, it's so obvious.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't even.
It's all in the details. Well, we
It's
do
all in
run
the
this
details.
as a museum. We have tours every week. We also have lectures or workshops and events every month. So this isn't just a restoration project. It is also a working heritage museum that's still being restored. Even some of the details, like we have to make sure to sweep out the house every week and dust, and some of the cobwebs on these high ceilings are really hard to get to.
Right.
So there's a lot of maintenance that goes into the site, but then we do also want to be actively sharing it with the public too.
Everything you're saying about like the lecture series and like events and like all this
yeah.
maintenance stuff, I think that's something that all three of you can relate to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's up to people like us to get people involved and get them understanding how we got to where we are today.
And that process of understanding turned out to be a rather lengthy one, because as it turned out, our tour, which was just, one day around Victoria, so many great stories, so much great architecture, it was actually too much to include in a single episode of Bon Victoriage. So we've actually divided this up into Bon Victoriage's very first two-parter. Woohoo! And you'll have to just wait for the rest of the stories for next episode. Next time, we're going to go on a backwards journey following the life of Victoria's most famous painter and author, Emily Carr, starting at her gravestone at Ross Bay Cemetery and ending at her birthplace, the Carr House, where among other things, Teresa gives architecture tours. We will meet one of Victoria's poets laureate emeritus, who will read us a topical poem, and along the way we will also visit one of Victoria's quirkiest character homes, a rock art garden created by a local artist named Miriam Barker. Seismology, artistry, poetry, and a whole lot more besides. So do stay tuned for Bon Victoriage, episode 6. You know, every season I get a new hat. I think I might be looking for one right now. Let's see.
A man who wears many hats.
Yes, I wear many hats. All right, let's try one that's more suitable for the size of my head.
Oh, that like works. That
To
works.
see, what? How about this?
Not bad.
Look.
Wrong way around. There you go.
There we go.
The ribbons are called follow me lads because they're supposed to flutter down your back and attract the gentleman to follow you.
Come here, gentlemen.
I noticed you didn't try on the bonnet. Any particular reason for that?
I haven't gotten to the bonnet yet.
Okay.
But let's get
just
on
making
it.
sure. That might be it.
You think this is the one?
Very possibly.
This is the one.